Very good. Welcome, everyone. It's Monday, February 26, 2024. It's time for the regularly scheduled city council meeting. Clerk, certify the meeting notice.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen? Here. Councilmember Page?
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Here.
Thank you. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item D, changes to the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Item F. This is council. I'm placing before you Kimberly E. Smith to serve as a planning and zoning commissioner and asking you to approve that appointment. Kim, can I call you Kim? Kim? Yeah, come on up. This is pretty informal. I'm hoping you'll limit your, I'm hoping you'll limit your acceptance speech to
Oh, most certainly.
15 or 20 minutes. Anyway,
Bless it up. Very good to see you.
I'm Lisa, nice to meet you.
Welcome to the team.
for the record, Kim's resume had been forwarded to the council members, and I'm happy to place this appointment to the council. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I enthusiastically support and would move that to authorize you to appoint Kimberly E. Smith to the Planning and Zoning Commission effective May 2025 through May 2025, excuse me, effective immediately.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Thank you. You're official now. Jenna will be getting a hold of you, and she will make an appointment with you to do an orientation. Little more than we did in the interview. So thank you for your willingness to serve.
Yes.
We look forward to having you on the team.
Congratulations.
Well, now, wait a minute.
We don't.
Chief.
I'm not sure we want to go that far. Anyway. And welcome to James. I assume that's a relative.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, James. Thank you for loaning us Kim. Okay, next item. We have our monthly staff reports in your agenda. Are there any questions? Okay. Then special business 3, the Development Services Departmental Notice of Decisions. Again, these are in your packets. It's a pleasure of the council on those.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
having reviewed the notice of decisions, I move to approve them as written, sustain the decisions made.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a tie for second. You can pick one, Lisa. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Thank you. Item G, this is resolution 1168-24. Lindsay, you want to come on up? This is the resolution approving a joint powers agreement for the city of Garden City to participate in this separate legal entity known as the Links Library Consortium. I asked Lindsay to come. Kim, Lindsay's our librarian. Okay. And I want Lindsay just to explain a little bit about what the Links Consortium is and why we belong to it and why we're interested in continuing to belong to it, hence this resolution.
And Mr. Mayor, just a quick point of order. Before the council votes, I would like to say something on this because it was a legal issue. I just want to make sure the council's aware of.
Okay, will do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the Links Consortium agreement that we'll be looking at today. So the Garden City Public Library is part of the Links Library Consortium. This is a group of 11 libraries throughout the area where we've all pooled our resources. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, libraries started moving their catalogs online. And the vendors who were creating these databases for us charged an outrageous amount of money. So much so that one library could not afford to go online by themselves. They had to create a consortium. So you'll find consortiums across the entire nation. It's pretty rare to find a public library that's not part of a consortium. Pretty good business model for the vendors, because if you make a database, whether your customer puts 100 records in there or 100,000 records in there, you still just created a database. So they created one database and they get to charge 11 libraries. So less work, more money. So that was kind of the trend across public libraries. Once we got into sharing our resources or having the same database, it just kind of naturally started happening that we would start sharing materials between each other. Because every library also in the nation has a service called interlibrary loan, where if you walk into a library and they don't have the material that you want, that library will go into a worldwide database and they will find that book for you throughout the world. The other library will mail it to you, you'll get to borrow it. So I can only imagine in the Treasure Valley, people were needing an item in Garden City. We looked in the worldwide database, Boise has it, Boise mails it to us through the US Postal Service. That starts happening a bit when eventually you got 20 books on your desk and I'm like, I'm just gonna drive it over to Boise. And then pretty soon you're like, we just need a van. We just need someone else to do this. So these things just kind of happened organically over time. And now we're just kind of intrinsically all connected. There's no way out. So there's two primary functions of having the consortium, the cost share on the software, and then to share the materials between the libraries. You can see we cover a large amount of space. We go all the way from Caldwell, all the way down over to Twin Falls. We go from Emmett all the way down to Cuna. So we cover a large amount of space. A couple of important features on this current links agreement. So we've had a links agreement for as long as I have worked here, but it's just been kind of an agreement on how all the cities are going to behave. This agreement is a joint powers agreement. So it's actually going to make the Links Consortium its own entity. So it's going to function in a very similar fashion that Compass is organized. So it's just like Compass, but in the libraries. So the pros of having our own entity is that the consortium is going to be able to hire an administrator, and we desperately need an administrator with 11 libraries, almost 500 staff, over 1 million items, titles. There's nobody focused on a consortium. We're all focused on our own libraries and just kind of making it work on the side. So to have an administrator is going to be really big for the area. The cons, though, is that as a consortium, we're now going to have to handle our own finances. We're going to have our own HR. We're going to have our own insurance because we're our own entity now. The consortium is its own entity. I don't think it'll be that bad, though. That's part that kind of makes me nervous about it. But we have a lot of district libraries in the consortium, and they've been doing this stuff all along. So they already know all the rules. They know the finances, and they've all stepped in and said, they have a little bit more leeway when it comes to finances too. They can set up other accounts. So they could actually have an administrator work through them, and then the consortium would just reimburse them. So it's a lot less complicated having them on board. So they'll be able to keep our costs down. The other important feature of this agreement is that we were able to keep in the compensation agreement. So since the consortium was created, the first people that created it wanted to make sure that taxpayer dollars were going to where people were using the libraries. So say, for example, I'm going to kind of make this up just so you can follow along. Say that a household was paying $40 in property taxes for the Garden City Library. And then the libraries looked and we realized that that household was actually using Boise Library as their primary library. So at the end of the year, Garden City will give that $40 to Boise and say, this is actually your taxpayer money. You're the one that serviced them. So after years of doing that, it started to just become really complicated, and it turned out it wasn't that big of an issue for most libraries. So what ended up happening is the Eagle Public Library would write a check to the Meridian Public Library for $2,000, and then Meridian Public Library would turn around and write a check for $2,000 back to Eagle. It was just a waste of time for most of the libraries. But it wasn't a waste of time for us. We are excessively used by other patrons, other cities' patrons. So to give you an example, last year we had 36,000 transactions from people who lived in Garden City, and we had 76,000 transactions from people outside of Garden City. 65,000 of those were from Boise. So from the Garden City perspective, we're serving all these people and we're not getting the taxes for it. That's hard, right? We're getting taxes from households of 5,000 households, but we're serving all these people. Like, we need to have some kind of compensation for the excessive use. From Boise Public Library, their perspective, they're like, we have a library that's less than 3 miles away. If you didn't exist, they would just come to us. So why would we have to pay you? And then the other libraries just wanted to get rid of it too. They're like, it doesn't benefit them at all. But we were able to convince the 11 libraries that yes, it's important enough to Garden City to leave it in there. And so I'm happy to say that we were able to leave it in there. That we did change the agreement, not in this version, but previously, to say that one library would have to compensate another library if there was excessive use. So that cut most of the libraries out, and it really just left Garden City and Boise in there. And that if there was excessive use, those two libraries would come up with an understanding themselves of what would be compensation. So it wasn't run by everybody else. If they couldn't figure it out, they'd go back to the group and get help figuring it out. So we have a separate agreement with Boise Public Library that says that they will pay Garden City if it's deemed that there's excessive use. We check every year. That they will pay Garden City $55,000, and that will increase 1% each year. And they will allow our patrons to have access to their overdrive account. So their overdrive is where everybody gets their ebooks and their e-magazines and their e-audio. When you add up how much money they put into their e-resources and the 2 staff members that have to function, have to run it, that's probably about a $200,000 value that we're getting. So it's a pretty good agreement. Both sides, it just happened to us. We're dealing with it. We have a pretty good working relationship with Boise Public, and I'm happy that it's staying in, and it's kind of to the side. So we can move on with that. So that's nice. The cost, what does it cost us to be in the Links Consortium? 15% of all costs will be shared equally among members, and then the remaining 85% will be shared pro rata based on each member's local operating income. So basically the first 15%, we all split equally. After that, it's kind of based on size. We're a smaller library, so we don't have to pay in as much as some of the larger libraries. So what we do pay, our Links membership cost is about $15,000 a year. That is a pretty good deal that we're getting. If we were to go off and get our own ILS system, it would cost at a minimum $25,000. Plus, we'd have to hire a full-time staff member to run it, which would be about another $70,000. So we're getting, for $15,000, we're getting $95,000 in value. Plus, we're getting access to over 1 million titles that can be shipped in to our patrons next day access. We only have 36,000 titles here at this library, but our patrons have access to well over 1 million. Our courier costs is about $11,000 a year, which is also a pretty good deal. A part-time minimum wage employee that works 19 hours a week costs $16,000 a year. So for less than that, we're getting courier service, and they have 2 full-time staff, 2 vans, and they come 5 days a week. And we get about 20 totes every day that we need to check in. So it's used and the cost is great. In conclusion, membership in Links has become an integral part of just being in the public library in the Treasure Valley. If we weren't a part of it, it's just like getting cut off from the vine. People would forget we're here, you know? We wouldn't have access to books. It would not be good for the people of Garden City.
Okay, questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Pettyjohn. I have a question. If Links becomes its own entity, will they, how will that affect things? I mean, you've been a champion for grants in our city, and we're grateful for that. Once Links becomes its own entity, are we going to be competing against essentially ourselves for grant money and improvements?
I don't think so, because I believe Links is always just going to stick to basically the software. At least for the knowable, at least the next 10 years, it's just going to be a way for us to cost share on that software. And so I don't see Links applying to really any grants, because we're not doing any functions at this point, unless it was like a new van or something like that, but that would be something we wouldn't qualify for anyway. So no, I don't think so.
So, okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
let's see, I was just curious, what is excessive?
So, so in the exhibit C, we put 50% or more of its own constituents.
Okay. Thank you.
And with Boise, we're at 180%. So
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have that going for a while.
It's important we add that in there. Thank you for fighting for that.
Well, she runs the best library in the state, so I don't know. And what, library of the year, what, twice in the last 6 years, 5 or 6 years?
All my friends who live in Boise are ready to come to Garden City.
Excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I was asking about the excessive.
Well,
Well, thank you for all your work.
a lot of good things here in the GC. Okay. There are no further questions. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, council.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Point of order.
Before we get there, can I just make a record of this, so the council's aware? This would be creating a new legal entity. The elements of Idaho Code 67-23-28 are present. I've started looking at this back in October. There's been a lot of back and forth between me and other attorneys. Holly Troxel, the law firm of Holly Troxel, worked on this. I've talked to Holly Troxel. I've talked to multiple city attorneys. I talked to, on behalf of the city of Boise, I talked to Ed Jewell, who's the city attorney that's working on this. It was Kelly Fleming that was assigned to libraries, but now it's Ed Jewell. So it's been a lot of back and forth. The main thing I wanted to let the council know is number one, there's a non-appropriation clause, so we can get out of this. The city can get out of this. If the city wants to get out of this, there's a non-appropriation clause, which might be a legal requirement for this type of an agreement anyways. There's an indemnification clause. I don't know if the indemnification clause is binding, because there has been some back and forth on whether you can, a government can indemnify another government entity. I don't think that matters, so I don't think the council really cares about that. That's a legal issue that it's not particularly relevant. What is relevant though is this is going to be a new entity, meaning that I sure hope they get insurance. And that's been my main rub on this from the beginning. ICRIMP will not insure this. So if we're using employees, this legal entity is going to have to provide insurance. And then I had questions about whether they have qualified immunity, so on and so forth. But the main takeaway is this is not going to be covered under our insurance policy. And so hopefully Links will get their own insurance policy. I had some wording added in the actual JPA talking about insurance, but that's going to be, from a liability, from a risk management standpoint, that's the main thing. Is they're not going to be insured under our policy. They're not going to be insured under ICRIMP. And so hopefully they take care of their employees and they get their own insurance. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
a question for Librarian Pettyjohn.
sure.
Thank you for coming back. Sorry about the walk. Earlier, you provided a record about the proliferation of consortiums across the country. Is there private insurance that is providing to these entities that you are aware of? Can we research a carrier?
Yes, it is on the list to look into insurance for links. The consortium hasn't done so yet. But it's on the list of to-dos, I guess. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, I'm kind of, yeah, thank you. I share some of the same concerns Mr. Wadums has, I think, especially if we're putting vans on the road.
So the courier part is run by Boise Public
Yeah,
Library at
should
this
say
point,
it's Boise.
and they are charging links for that, but they are running it. The courier at this point is not Links. Links is paying Boise to run the courier, so they are under Boise for the time being, for probably the next few years until we continue to grow and get things organized.
That would be the biggest concern I had.
We can get an insurance certificate as part of the approval. If you choose to approve. So,
Well, I mean, Mr. Wadums, why won't ICRIM take this up?
Well, Council President Page, Mayor, Council Member, Council President Page, there's been back and forth. I mean, ICRIM said they're not going to touch it, and I'm going to read it into the record.
Mr. Wadums, I remember reading the email, and they said that some of the libraries were not members of ICRIM at this time. So I don't believe they wanted to.
Boise's not a member of ICRIM.
ICRIM, quote, from their insurance adjuster, underwriter, ICRIM insures some, but not all of the member cities, districts involved in links. Links is not an ICRIM member, and ICRIM would decline to quote due to underlying members not being insured by ICRIM. That being said, for Garden City and any other library city that is an ICRIM member, ICRIM covers the city and its employees, volunteers while acting in the course and scope of their duties. If the city or individuals are named in a covered claim, ICRIM defends. If Links is named or anyone while acting in the course of scope of Links and not the city, ICRIM will not cover them. It is an important distinction to make since Links is or will soon be its own separate legal entity. Procuring insurance for Links and its employees, officers and volunteers is critical so that Garden City's employees and volunteers are still covered while working or performing tasks on or behalf of Links. So it's an issue I spotted. It's an issue that I still have some concern with unless they get adequate insurance coverage.
But Mr. Bottoms, if there is a claim, and there's no insurance, do all the cities just share and whatever that might be, if there's no more?
Well, if it's a Boise employee, I'm gonna say that we shouldn't have to pay for that. I mean, it's been a consortium for years, and my understanding is this has been a consortium for years, and then the city of Boise thought that they were carrying too much of their own, the freight themselves, and so it's the city of Boise that went to Holly Troxel, I think, and said we want a separate legal entity and not a consortium.
Right.
Yeah,
So back in 2014, when we switched ILS software companies, that's software at the time said the next time we switch, it's probably going to cost about $1 million to switch. So we have about $900,000 as a consortium from our membership dues working on to switch over, but costs have gone down significantly because of cloud-based software. So if there was a lawsuit, I would assume that would be the first coffer to get hit.
well,
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Pettyjohn, what is the, I guess, deadline or target date for executing this agreement?
I
Do we have
believe
time?
it's the end of March, I believe, was the deadline for everybody to have their signed.
Mr. Mayor, I just feel like there's a lot of pretty important questions here that kind of remain unanswered about this insurance piece is really my concern. I don't know if we can task Mr. Wadums or one of his staff to dig deeper on that, or if that is a library function. I don't know.
well, if they're hiring a director for the
Mhm.
links, then we'll just inquire on the insurance. So you can do two things. We can wait, or you can make the approval contingent upon insurance coverage is approved by the city attorney. So whichever way you want to go. I think I should point out that our city employees aren't going to be working for Links Consortium, are they? No.
No, would be
No,
just on the
so-
board.
The van shows up and drops off or picks up and leaves. So, you know, as a member of the consortium, I'm not quite sure where our particular liability would be, although they need to have insurance. So I'm not sure what specific. So is the consortium, I looked at the heading, but is it a corporation? Is it it's just a joint powers entity?
Yeah, it's just a joint powers agreement. There's no,
Okay, so as a joint powers entity, then who's the board?
the board or the directors of the libraries.
Okay,
So we are meeting in a couple weeks and I thought about it, but I can make it an agenda item to get liability insurance for the board ASAP.
okay.
And then, like I
Okay.
said, I think the courier is still under Boise, but
So I would suggest you get officer and director insurance as
Mhm.
well. So if you're going to be on the board.
yes.
So anyway, I think we can get that sorted out. I think everybody will have the same interests, I would imagine, that looks at this. So so again, you can, go ahead.
You had mentioned you could get a certificate after the signing, is that?
I'm just, no, if the council chooses to approve the resolution could be, the motion would be that the resolution wouldn't really consummate until after the city attorney approves the insurance. Or if you prefer to wait, you can wait.
Mr. Mayor, my concern with language to that effect is I just feel like we don't need additional barriers for access to books for our patrons, especially some of the most underserved people that live here in Garden City. And so if we were to make that contingent and for some reason we're not able to get insurance, yeah, I just I want to weigh the value of insurance over nourishing young minds and keeping people informed.
Well, this is just an opinion, but I'm not too worried about getting the insurance. I mean, insurers cover, travelers will insure it. I mean, that's what they do, a lot of governmental entities. So I think if Lindsay's involved on the board, she needs to have O&D insurance for her personally. We could call that in the scope of her employment here, but you know, it's not, in this circumstance, it's not expensive insurance to get. If you're on a homeowner's board, I would recommend the same thing. So anyway, I think that's where we are. I agree with you, Council President. But if you looked at the folks in the consortium, this isn't, there'll be insurance because it wouldn't be whether we're going to decide to go it alone without any insurance. I don't think that's contemplated, and that's what Lindsay indicated in her presentation, that insurance is one of the components that's going to be required because they're going to have staff members working. So the Links Consortium, so they're going to have workers' comp and then some form of liability insurance. And the directors need O&D. So I think that's pretty straightforward. So anyway.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
with that assurance, I move to approve resolution 1168-24, approving a joint powers agreement for the city of Garden City to participate in the separate entity known as Links.
I'd second that.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I believe that the approval will be conditioned on insurance provided, reviewed and approved by the city's attorney, correct?
that wasn't stated in the motion, but as the city administrator, I wouldn't sign an agreement without an insurance component to it. So if you want the motion restated, you can address the council president. If that's not the intent in your motion, then we'll vote on the motion that's on the floor.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
Mr. Council President, I'm comfortable with the way you stated the motion. I think given the risk and Garden City employees aren't in the consortium, I'd say move forward, and then, like you said, given the people that are members, there'll be some insurance at some point.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with that, I'm comfortable with the motion as stated as well.
okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Okay, that concludes the items on our agenda tonight. We've got a couple of items we could discuss in executive session, but I think we'll wait till the next meeting, when Councilmember Jorgensen's with us, and they're just updates. It's nothing urgent. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned.
You notice the time we adjourned?